Welcome to the Partnership Power Hour with your guest host, Claire Moazingo, featuring guests Denise Lafferty and Dr. Kevin Sullivan.
All right, as Miss Sandra would say, it is 10 o'clock, everyone. Welcome to the Partnership Power Hour. Today's Tuesday, May 24th. And as you probably noticed, I'm not your typical host. My name is Claire Moazingo, and I will be standing in for Sandra today as she is out of town. So this is just a quick friendly reminder that everyone is muted whenever they come on the call. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please press *6 to unmute yourself and then *6 again to mute yourself once you have completed your question. So today we are very, very excited to welcome Ms. Denise Lafferty and Dr. Kevin Sullivan to talk about the Mind Center and give us a little bit of an overview of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Denise and Dr. Sullivan. So if y'all wouldn't mind, just give us a brief introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good morning. This is Denise Lafferty, and I'm the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer at the Mind Center at UMMC here in Jackson. And I have been here for about 9 years now. I moved here from Pennsylvania. So if you think I have a funny accent, that's the reason why. And I have been thrilled to be working with the Mind Center because I was affected by Alzheimer's disease in my family. Both my grandmother as well as my mother died from Alzheimer's disease. So I'm going to be telling you a bit more about what we do at the Mind Center, and Dr. Sullivan, I'll let him introduce himself, but he's going to be telling you about some of the research projects that we have underway. Dr. Sullivan?
Hi, thank you, Denise, and hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Sullivan. I'm an aging epidemiologist specializing in neuropsychiatrics and dementia at the Mind Center. I'm our assistant director of the neuroepidemiology core here. I have been at UMMC for almost 3 years, and I also hail from Pennsylvania, so Denise and I have that in common, so we won't have any accent switching during today's call, at least.
Well, Claire, I'll go ahead and get started if that's okay, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sullivan. Okay, great. Also, we're excited to be here today, and just a little overview of what we're going to be talking about. We want to tell you a bit in general about Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and how to recognize the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia. I'm going to give you an introduction to the Mind Center at UMMC, a little bit of history, and a little bit of detail about what we do. And then Dr. Sullivan is going to talk about some of the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and then tell you about some of our many research projects that we have underway here at the Mind Center. So first, I wanted to basically describe what dementia is. Dementia is a set of symptoms that are linked to disorders caused by abnormal brain changes that trigger a decline in thinking and memory skills and are severe enough that they start to impair your daily life and how you are able to function independently. Dementia is progressive in nature, so the symptoms that develop gradually become worse and eventually cause the brain cells to die. And that's what causes many of the symptoms that occur. So frequently we get asked, well, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Or sometimes we'll hear someone say, well, my mother has dementia, but she doesn't have Alzheimer's, or the other way around. So just a brief description of the difference. So dementia is an umbrella term used to describe that range of symptoms that are associated with cognitive impairment. And so there are many different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. It represents about 50 to 75% of all cases. And not too long ago, I read in a scientific publication that there are now about 100 different types of dementia. So it's very prevalent, most definitely. But again, the most common type that we see is Alzheimer's disease. And so that's why frequently you hear people refer to, those symptoms of cognitive impairment as Alzheimer's. So I don't know about y'all, but as I am getting older, I sometimes am concerned about changes in my memory. And so I wanted to touch on some characteristics that are normal with aging. We all become a little bit more forgetful. But then I also want to identify some things that may be concerning and that you may want to get checked out if you are experiencing any of these. So first of all, with normal aging, you may occasionally have trouble recalling people or places. Like you may see someone who you haven't seen for a really long time, and you can't quite figure out where you know them from or what their name is, and that's okay. But if you get to the point where you're not remembering the names of close friends who you see all the time and you know very well, or even family members or relatives, then that is something that you may want to be concerned about. If you are forgetting appointments or events occasionally, that is okay. We all do that. But if you're frequently forgetting appointments or events, again, that may be concerning. If you're taking longer to process information as you get older than you did when you were younger, that's very normal. But if you're having trouble expressing your thoughts, or you're having to stop in the middle of a conversation to think about what you want to say next, or you're substituting common words in place of what you actually mean to say, then that might be concerning. Also, occasionally forgetting where you put something is totally normal, but if you're consistently misplacing items and you can't backtrack to figure out where you might have left it, then again, that may be concerning. So if you're having any of the characteristics that are in the maybe concerning category, then you may want to speak to your primary care physician or your family doctor and let them know about what you're experiencing. So a few facts and figures about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, which are pretty staggering. Worldwide, there are approximately 57 million people today who are living with Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia. And more than 6 million Americans and over 57,000 Mississippians are currently living with Alzheimer's disease. The scary thing is that these numbers are projected to triple by the year 2050. That is, unless we find new treatments or ways to prevent these diseases. Alzheimer's disease is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States and in Mississippi. And Alzheimer's kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. 1 in 3 seniors will die with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. And Alzheimer's is the only disease in the top 10 causes of death in America that cannot be prevented, slowed, or cured yet. And I say yet because one of the key missions of the Mind Center at UMMC is to find answers about these diseases and new treatments and new methods of prevention for Alzheimer's and related dementias. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Mind Center. MIND stands for Memory Impairment and Neurodegenerative Dementia Center. And we were founded in 2010 by Dr. Tom Mosley, and he is a nationally recognized expert in brain aging and dementia. And he hails from Louisiana, but he has actually been here at UMMC for almost 30 years now. And the Mind Center is a national leader in Alzheimer's and dementia research and clinical care, and we are located at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Here at UMMC, our main operations are located in the Translational Research Center, and our center here is called the Gertrude C. Ford Mind Research Center because the Mind Center received a donation from the Gertrude Ford Foundation in order to establish our center here on the first floor of the Translational Research Center. The Mind Center is a comprehensive center at UMMC, and so similar to UMMC, we have 3 mission areas, and they include research, healthcare, and education. And I'm going to touch very briefly on our research mission and give you just a very general overview, and then Dr. Sullivan is going to go into more detail about a few of our many research projects. So our research mission is to understand the causes and develop new treatments for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And we have 4 main areas of focus in our research. The primary area that we're focused on is looking at risk factors for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. We also have studies underway in the area of genetics. We also do imaging or neuroimaging studies, and we also have a clinical trials program where we offer the community, our Mind Center patients, and our other study participants the opportunity to be part of clinical trials that are being provided by pharmaceutical or biotechnology companies. So currently, the Mind Center has 21 active studies or grants from the National Institutes of Health that total more than $37 million in federal funding. The National Institutes of Health is the main body of the federal government that funds research here in the United States. The Mind Center is also very thankful to receive a line item appropriation in funding annually from the state legislature. And we also have wonderful community support in the way of funding from private donors and supporters. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our healthcare mission. And for those of you who may have a copy of the slides that you're following along in, the slide features Dr. Mark Meeks, and he is with one of our geriatric and Mind Center clinic patients who gave her consent to be featured. Our healthcare mission is to deliver state-of-the-art diagnosis and treatment for patients who are experiencing memory loss and cognitive impairment resulting from Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And we do have a focus on ensuring that we are bringing compassionate and quality care to the underserved and to remote parts of our state. The Mind Center Clinic was launched in October of 2013, and we have 3 clinic locations here in the Jackson area at the University Physicians Pavilion, Grants Ferry, and a new location in River Chase. And we offer diagnosis and treatment for memory loss and cognitive impairment. And we also look to address any medical, social, and psychosocial needs that the family or the patient may have. We know that this is a disease that not only affects the individual who has it, but it really affects their entire family. And these diseases can go on for, it's estimated, between 7 to 12 years on average. And so it's really important that the family receive the guidance and support that they need. So we do accept self-referrals to the Mind Center Clinic. So if anyone who is on this call is currently having some memory issues that they're concerned about, or if you have a loved one who you've noticed some changes in their memory that are concerning to you, you can call 601-496-MIND, which is 6463, and click on option 1 to get to our Mind Center schedulers. Again, that's 601-496-6463, option 1. A little bit more about what the initial evaluation or diagnosis process entails. It's usually 1 to 2 Mind Center clinic visits to do that initial workup. And the very first visit is typically 90 minutes long. So our providers really spend a good bit of time not only with the patient, but with their family member who accompanies them. and they do a really thorough history. So they want to know from the patient and also from the family member what changes they've experienced or observed in their thinking or memory, or changes in how they work through kind of day-to-day processes. They also will conduct a really thorough physical and neurological exam. They do cognitive testing, and they also test for depression, because depression can contribute to the development of dementia, but also the symptoms of depression can be very similar to the symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia. They'll conduct lab studies, and they also will typically do brain imaging, usually an MRI or a CAT scan of the brain. The Mind Center Clinic is staffed by a team of experienced geriatricians, neurologists, consulting neuropsychologists, and psychiatrists. And we also have 2 nurse practitioners and a social worker, 2 RN care coordinators, and 2 patient schedulers. If anyone is not familiar with what a geriatrician is is someone who treats older adults, typically 60 years of age or older. And so the majority of our providers in the Mind Center Clinic are board certified in geriatrics, but again, we also have a neurologist and the other specialists who I mentioned. Usually when the patient comes in for their initial visit, we will either have our social worker or one of our nurse care coordinators there to meet the family and to kind of get locked in to be able to provide support with community resources, financial information, or as the disease progresses, to help the family with managing any behavioral issues that may arise through their loved one. Our providers also stay in close collaboration with the patient's primary care physician. So we're not looking to take over the care of the patient, but to stay focused on helping the patient and the family with their Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Once the initial plan of care is set up, the patient will generally come to the Mind Center Clinic about every 3 to 6 months so that the physician can monitor their disease progression and make sure that they're tolerating any medications that they're on, and also to be able to support the patient and the family or caregiver. I also wanted to mention that we do currently have telehealth visits available, so patients can be seen from the comfort of their home, currently using an application called Epic Extended Care. And I think maybe that's one silver lining of the pandemic, that Medicare is still reimbursing for these telehealth visits in the home, regardless of whether someone lives in a remote area where there aren't enough specialists. So that is still available, and you would call the same number that I previously gave you, 601-496-6463, option 1, to schedule a telehealth visit. And the really cool thing about the Epic Extended Care app is that family members can join in on that telehealth appointment from wherever they are. So the family members don't have to be in the same location as the patient, and they can still join in and be part of that visit. Also in 2014, we launched a telehealth program called Telemind in partnership with UMMC Center for Telehealth. And with this program, we have satellite clinics that we've set up primarily in the Delta. And we have nurses who will meet the patient and the family at a clinic location, and then they'll connect with our geriatric specialist or neurologist here in Jackson and receive the same type of workup or visit that the patient would receive if they had come to Jackson. So this is a really nice program, again, to bring the services to the patient so that they don't need to make the trip to Jackson. I mentioned that we really put a lot of focus on supporting the families of those who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia. So we offer a variety of caregiver support services. We offer individual or group and family counseling. We offer telephone consultations, financial and insurance guidance, legal consultation, and we have a statewide network of more than 35 caregiver support groups that we support. Additionally, the Mind Center has a caregiver support group that meets the third Monday of each month at 5:30, and that is currently being held by Zoom. So if anyone is interested in being part of that caregiver support group, you can email mindcenter at UMC for universitymedicalcenter.edu. The Mind Center also sponsors a program in partnership with the Mississippi Museum of Art called Art in Mind. This is a free monthly program for someone with memory loss and their caregiver. And there's an opportunity to view art in the gallery and then to actually create art in the studio. And we were holding this by Zoom, but starting this month, we are going back to in-person Art in Mind programs. Briefly, I'm going to tell you about our education and outreach services. Our mission in this area is to provide comprehensive training and development on Alzheimer's disease, brain wellness, and dementia prevention and care to both healthcare professionals and to the broader community. And we also offer a lot of education focused on supporting older adults and caregivers of those with Alzheimer's and dementia. One program that we have on an ongoing basis is called Mind Matters, and it's a free community education series for older adults or family caregivers of those with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Before the pandemic, we were holding it every other month at the Student Union Building here at UMMC. We have still been offering it virtually via Zoom, which we plan to continue for the short term, but I believe that we'll start back, if not in the summer, by the fall with in-person educational programs. The Mind Center also hosts the only statewide annual conference on Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And in 2022, we're going to be hosting the 22nd annual Alzheimer's conference. And this is a 2.5-day conference primarily focused on healthcare professionals, nurses and social workers and nursing home administrators. But we also do invite students and family caregivers to attend as well. And this year's conference has a theme of conquering caregiving challenges, and it's going to be held on October 26th through the 28th at the Hilton Jackson Hotel and Conference Center on County Line Road. Additionally, the Mind Center distributes a resource guide, which is called Navigating Alzheimer's and Related Dementias, a Roadmap for Families. This 220-page reference was written and published by the Mind Center in partnership with the Department of Mental Health and Alzheimer's Mississippi. And we provide this guide for free. It is available online on our website at umc.edu/Mind Center. Or if you would like to receive a copy, you can email us at mindcenter@umc.edu. Lastly, during the pandemic, actually in the fall of 2020, the Mind Center launched a new educational program for family caregivers called Caregiver University. And this is a quarterly multi-session training program for family caregivers. It has about 17 classes or modules that we provide over a 2-week period, and it's focused on helping that family caregiver improve care delivery and support for their loved one. There's no charge to attend this program, and the classes are taught by experts not only from the Mind Center and UMMC, but from several different partner organizations here in the Jackson area. The dates at Caregiver University for the rest of this year are September 13th through the 23rd or November 8th through the 18th. And if you're interested in learning more about that or registering to attend, you can go on our website at umc.edu/Mind Center. And in the educational section, you'll find more information about Caregiver University as well as an application. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Sullivan to provide a research update, and I understand that we will have time for any questions at the end. Dr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Denise, for that great overview of the Mind Center. And I'll really quickly introduce myself for anyone who joined late. My name is Kevin Sullivan, and I'm a neuropsychiatric epidemiologist specializing in aging and dementia with a faculty appointment in the Mind Center. And I'd like to take a few moments to cover some of the recent research of our site, our ongoing studies, and new studies that we are very excited about. So I'll start by, again, clarifying what we mean by distinguishing cognitive changes that are totally a normal part of aging, and Denise covered this really well, so I'll just re-summarize some of those things. I'll cover the atherosclerosis risk in community study, or the ARIC study, which is one of our largest and longest running endeavors. I'll talk a little bit about blood biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease, which, when I say the term biomarker, I'm really just talking essentially pieces of various proteins that we can measure in blood now. That's very exciting progress. And I'll just close out by talking about our new study that is actually enrolling participants right now, our new Mind Center Mayo Clinic study of aging. So to start off, again, let's revisit this really quickly, normal versus abnormal cognitive aging. Now, really, just with our physical abilities, there are expected and totally normal cognitive changes that occur as we get older. Our brains actually physically get smaller in advanced aging, and this is a normal part of the human lifespan. So, of course, we can expect some degree of memory and thinking decline accompanying that. Now, as Denise mentioned, if these problems are to the extent that they interfere significantly with someone's day-to-day living or are causing stress to them or their family, then it may be time to talk to a doctor. And this does not mean that you have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Some forms of cognitive issues we see in older adults are completely reversible, such as, an adverse side effect from a new medication. And then you get taken off that medication and all of a sudden you're completely fine. I must emphasize that Alzheimer's disease is not an inevitable outcome of aging. There is no, oh, well, if we all live long enough, we'll all get it. No, this is a very specific disease, referring to a very specific combination of various brain disease processes that eventually result in dementia. So in a way, people who develop dementia, they can be thought of as being on a different trajectory of cognitive decline, even from midlife when compared to people who experience normal cognitive changing with aging, which is much more subtle and gradual. The people on the path to dementia, they decline earlier. The decline starts to accelerate and eventually leads to total loss of function, where there's a very large difference between an 85-year-old person with dementia and an 85-year-old person who has experienced normal cognitive decline with age. And it is a crucial goal of aging and dementia research to identify individuals who are on that bad path of accelerating cognitive decline that we think will ultimately result in dementia, so that we can study ways to slow or reverse that trajectory altogether. And one of the studies that is actively pursuing these questions is the atherosclerosis risk in community study, or the ARIC study. For those that don't know, this is a multi-center cohort study that began in 1987 with almost 16,000 middle-aged adults in 4 communities in the U.S., Minneapolis, Minnesota, Forsyth County, North Carolina, which is where Wake Forest University is, Washington County, Maryland, around Baltimore, and our own site in Jackson at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. The initial aim of the ARIC study was to identify risk factors for atherosclerosis, that's a buildup of plaque materials in our arteries, heart disease, and stroke. But it really evolved into a broader study that included looking at brain aging and dementia. And we're currently seeing participants at the Mind Center for the 9th in-person visit of Eric with several more plans over the coming years. And through the contributions of Eric and other studies, we have learned that there are a lot of risk factors that relate to Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, almost too many, that it makes it hard to focus on and understand which of them really matter and are targets for intervention. For example, the strongest predictor of dementia is simply age. And again, I emphasize that dementia is not a normal part of aging, but it does become more common with age. Lower educational attainment is associated with the higher lifelong risk of dementia. Various cardiovascular risk factors, as I'll talk about in a minute. Depression, social isolation, even air pollution has been linked to dementia risk. And we don't quite understand the biological mechanisms linking all of these risk factors to brain disease quite yet, but the evidence is accumulating that there certainly is a meaningful relationship there that we need to explore. I'll talk a little bit more about cardiovascular risk factors because this is probably one of the primary findings of the ERIC study. So hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and smoking are all associated with an increased lifetime risk of dementia, perhaps especially when you measure these things at midlife. So a person with a lifelong history of these risk factors has especially elevated risk. And unfortunately, evidence is kind of lacking that controlling these modifiable factors will outright prevent or delay dementia, but ultimately, better cardiovascular health, regular physical activity, healthy diet, these have numerous benefits that maybe also include lower dementia risk. So it's just things we like to recommend anyway as behavioral changes because it can only be a win-win. A good example of this specifically came from a recent ERIC investigation that showed that people with diabetes in their middle age showed about 8 years more of cognitive aging over the following 20 years compared to people with no history of diabetes. So these cardiovascular risk factors do seem to be associated with that accelerating cognitive decline as we age, which again, the concern is that that accelerated decline could eventually result in dementia. Another risk factor I want to touch on specifically that the ERIC study has helped identify is head injury. So traumatic brain injury, or TBI, it really is still a poorly understood and incredibly diverse concept that has gained increasing attention lately with regards to dementia. So estimates from studies including ERIC suggest that even a single TBI event increases one's lifetime risk of dementia anywhere from 20 to 40%. And it may also be associated with increased buildup of brain amyloid plaques, which many of us have heard of. Those are the primary pathological hallmark signs of Alzheimer's disease. There's also evidence that this relationship is additive. So with subsequent events, additional TBIs past that first one, we actually see increasing dementia risk and increasing plaque deposition. We're not really sure why this relationship is so strong, but it is a very active research area, especially because when you watch the news and you hear about TBI or concussion, you might think of football or the NFL. But the reality is that the two most common causes of TBI are falls and motor vehicle accidents, which are two events that disproportionately affect older adults and make this research area even more of a priority in dementia. So I'll switch gears a little bit at this point because I want to touch on blood biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. This is a very hot topic right now that we and others are very involved with pursuing. And again, when I say the term biomarker, it really is just anything in the body that we can measure, like cholesterol can be a biomarker. But here we are mostly talking about very tiny protein fragments. Alzheimer's disease is defined by three pathological processes. The first is the buildup of those amyloid plaques in the brain. The second is the buildup of misfolded protein called tau in the brain, which forms very destructive tangles. So those two are the plaques and tangles that we often hear about with Alzheimer's disease. And the third is brain volume loss or neurodegeneration. And we've come a long way in measuring these things. It used to be that we would only verify them for sure at autopsy, but brain imaging advancements now allow us to see these processes starting and happening in a living person. We can also measure fragments of these proteins related to Alzheimer's disease in the cerebrospinal fluid, which is the protective fluid that surrounds the brain and, among other functions, helps clear waste products from the brain. So if we see pieces of tau protein or amyloid plaques or dead neurons in this cerebrospinal fluid, that gives us a lot of information about what is going on in the brain. But the limitations here are pretty obvious. Neuroimaging is extremely expensive, and sampling the cerebrospinal fluid involves a lumbar puncture, or more commonly known as a spinal tap, in which they stick a big needle in your back. I've had two myself. They are not fun. So for a while, people have talked about how great would it be if we could measure these things in blood? That would be so much easier. It would be so much less expensive. But that was easier said than done, because these are very small markers, and there are not a whole lot of them circulating in the blood, so they're very hard to detect. But now our testing methods have improved to the point where we can reliably measure these proteins in blood, and they have shown very strong correlations with what we see in the brain and what we see in the cerebrospinal fluid, and in some cases are actually detectable even before the pathology begins in the brain, which has a lot of exciting implications for early detection and hopefully someday prevention. I'll go into a little more detail on one of these that you may have heard of and we've worked a lot with here, and that is plasma amyloid, which again, amyloid is what forms those plaques in the brain that we've known about and we've been studying for a century in relation to Alzheimer's disease. There is one particular variant of amyloid called amyloid beta 42. It is an extremely sticky substance, and it is prone to accumulate in the brain into these plaques. Now, A beta is routinely cleared out from a healthy brain. And somewhat confusingly, we actually want to be able to detect a high amount of A beta 42 in the cerebrospinal fluid or the blood or both, because that actually means that our body is doing a good job clearing it from the brain. Plasma amyloid assays, they detect very small amounts of this A beta 42 in the blood. And we and others have presented really exciting results that you can actually test for it very, very early. And that early part is really important because from what we understand now about Alzheimer's disease, these pathological processes that I've talked about, including the plaques and the tangles, well, they're actually developing potentially decades before we can actually observe symptoms of dementia. And hopefully this is where the blood tests can really shine, because we're not going to give a healthy 50-year-old with no symptoms a brain scan or a spinal tap. But they might walk out of the clinic with undetected Alzheimer's disease pathology that is starting to take shape. Blood tests are cheaper, they're more accessible, and to the point that someday maybe we would test that person, although that is probably a ways off. It is a major goal of aging studies to understand when these processes start and how to slow or prevent them. But to do that, we need reliable ways to measure them at multiple time points, which hopefully blood testing would provide that advantage. So we actually examined plasma amyloid in ERIC ourselves. We published a paper in the journal Neurology last year that looked at this question. We went all the way back to the third visit of the ERIC study in the 90s and measured plasma amyloid using frozen blood samples of over 2,000 participants. And what we found that even measured back then, amyloid in the blood was associated with risk of dementia 20 to 25 years later. Again, in the pattern of actually higher amyloid in the blood was actually a good thing. Essentially, it's better to find it in the blood than it is to find it in the brain. And this study really marked one of the longest term studies of plasma amyloid in relation to dementia, and really provided some exciting evidence that these tests might have uses decades before we actually expect cognitive decline or dementia. Now, I covered that in a little bit more detail, but the amyloid is only one aspect of Alzheimer's disease. I talked a little bit about tau protein and neurodegeneration. Well, there are new biomarkers being identified in relation to these processes as well. We can measure fragments of tau protein in the blood. We can also measure essentially the skeletal fragments of dead neurons in the blood too. So these blood tests are approaching the problem of measuring multiple facets of Alzheimer's disease in hopefully an easier, more accessible, and more cost-effective way. We are now planning to measure all of these newly developed markers in the ERIC study, and we also envision that blood biomarkers will be a large component of our new study of aging, but more on that in a moment. So I do hope I've conveyed some excitement about the progress that has been made with these blood tests, but I do have to bring us back down to earth a bit and mention that there are many questions and obstacles to be tackled before these tests are ready for what would be considered widespread clinical implementation. And that basically comes down to, we just don't know enough about how accurate these will be in diverse populations with respect to racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as people with multiple comorbidities like cardiovascular disease or chronic kidney disease. Things like the kidneys and the liver are especially important to consider, as these are the organs responsible for flushing out and filtering out our blood. So we might think we've discovered an Alzheimer's disease biomarker in someone's blood that we think is related to brain disease, but it's actually just that their kidneys aren't working very well to flush that out, which is also bad, but it's a different problem. Now, the field is addressing these questions, but at the very least, we've seen enough that we're at least confident enough in these blood tests that they are now being used for screening for inclusion in Alzheimer's disease clinical trials. So, for example, if you're running a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical trial for Alzheimer's disease, you want to make sure you have enough people in your trial who might actually have it or show early signs of it. So these blood tests are being used to recruitment into trials. And we at the Mind Center plan to be very active with our new study of aging in contributing to the validation of these blood biomarkers in diverse populations and hopefully pave the way for clinic use. So I've mentioned this a couple times, but I will close by mentioning our new study. It's the Mind Center Mayo Clinic Study of Aging. This is in collaboration with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. The Mayo Clinic Study of Aging is a long-running cohort study of community adults researching risk factors and biomarkers related to dementia, and it has made many important discoveries related to Alzheimer's disease. What we plan to do is implement their study methods in a sample here that we hope to include thousands of Mississippi residents to participate in every other year study visits that will include assessments of thinking and physical abilities, cardiovascular risk factors, blood tests for biomarkers, and brain scans, with the ultimate goal of helping to better identify ways to diagnose and prevent Alzheimer's disease and promote healthier aging. So we're very excited about this study and the interest we've gotten from the community so far. I'd like to extend an invitation to get in touch with us if you or someone you know might be interested in learning more. We can be reached by phone at 601-984-6654. That's 601-984-6654. Or you can reach out to us by email at studyofaging@umc.edu, or visit our website at www.umc.edu/studyofaging, and we'd be more than happy to chat with you. We're currently enrolling individuals over age 55, who primarily live in Hinds, Rankin, or Madison County, but please, if you would like to know more, just get in touch with us. And as I close here, I just want to quickly say thank you to our staff and participants at the Mind Center for their invaluable contributions, and thank our National Institutes of Health and State of Mississippi funding. We're just so excited to be welcoming back our ERIC participants for study visits. These 16,000 adults and the some 5,000 we have left in the study have, through sacrificing their time, just made such a difference in scientific knowledge of cardiovascular disease, aging, and dementia. It really all starts with them and the impact they've made. And I'm sure we'll look back on our study of aging participants in the same way. They have a lot to be proud of, and we thank them wholeheartedly. I do think we have some time for questions, but you can feel free to reach out to me directly about anything I've talked about today. I'd be happy to speak with you. My email is ksullivan3@umc.edu. Thank you.
That was an amazing presentation, and all this information is just so wonderful to have. Thank y'all. So with that, let's go ahead and open up the floor to questions. So if you have a question, please press *6 to unmute yourself and ask away.
And if you have a question, please remember to *6 yourself and unmute. If there are no questions, Claire, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so let's go back to traumatic brain injury. So is there any evidence that traumatic brain injury earlier in life impacts your chances of developing dementia later on, or is it more TBIs later in life are going to increase your risk?
So that's a great question, and I'm not sure we've seen studies that have really delved into that issue. I can say that 20 to 40% increased risk is time independent. So even a TBI occurring at midlife would be included in that higher risk. We probably need further study when it comes to late life TBIs that are very close to the onset of dementia, because you have to be careful with acute cognitive decline that is due to the TBI and separate that out from the cognitive decline that we would expect to see with dementia. That can be very difficult to do. But so I'm not sure how much of that relationship is driven by a TBI at any point in your life or a TBI a year within your dementia diagnosis. I think those probably are very impactful. But when it comes to things like falls, declining physical function is also a sign of potentially preclinical dementia in older age. So in a way, this could be a little circular where you have these prodromal signs of dementia, your physical function is declining, your balance is declining, then you fall and you get a TBI, and we might look at the TBI as a risk factor for dementia, but actually it was the dementia that led to the TBI. So it's very, very difficult to separate these issues. And again, we're not really sure of what the mechanism linking, that TBI 10, 20 years before dementia is. I think all we can really conclude is that sustaining a brain injury is bad, and not everyone might be able to repair that damage as efficiently.
Right. Okay. So earlier you had also mentioned that people who are at higher risk for Alzheimer's and other dementias, you saw signs even in midlife, signs of accelerating cognitive decline. So what are some of those signs that you would look for someone who may be at an increased risk of developing dementia later on?
It would be extremely difficult to determine those things without a neuropsychological exam. So when we're talking, so you're not going to see any sort of behavioral, increased forgetfulness at those ages, and that then manifests in dementia, 20 years later. It would really take a full neuropsychological exam, which is going to provide a more detailed report of a person's cognitive capacities to be able to see those things. So they're extremely, extremely subtle. To the point where in your 50s, someone who's going to end up with dementia 20 years later and someone who's going to be fine 20 years later, in terms of their cognitive abilities, they might actually look extremely similar. It comes down to really in-depth assessments and repeated assessments to see how they're progressing over time. There really wouldn't be any, obvious signs you could pick up on from someone's day-to-day functioning, unless they were developing early onset Alzheimer's disease, which is a thing. It's very genetically based. Then you would see really severe deficits even in someone who was 50 years old.
That's great information to have. Thank you so much. Anybody else have a question for Denise or Dr. Sullivan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan, could you review again what the main question of in the healthy aging study is, are you looking further at risk factors?
Of course. Yeah. So the study, it's a great question. And the study has a lot of aims. We are looking at risk factors. We want to look at brain imaging for people who are interested in that. We want to look at blood tests for people who are interested in that. Our assessment is going to, cover a variety of factors, including cognitive function, physical function, risk factors. And, kind of like I said before, there's just so many risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Any study that, wants to explore this has to be pretty broad in the factors that they're examining. So we have had to pack a lot into our assessment protocol here, but that is the overall goal of the study of aging. We want to find ways that can, better identify and classify Alzheimer's disease earlier and better. So hopefully we can play a role in when, God willing, some preventative interventions are available, we can be prepared to do them.
This question may be too down in the weeds, so tell me if it is. If you have someone in your study who enrolls who shows some concerning signs clinically, how is that handled?
Those results would be reported to them and their study informant. Denise might have talked about this a little bit with some of our programs. To be in our study, we usually ask that a family member be available for contact. That if anything that we find on a study exam, it's just a research study, that is clinically actionable, gets immediately reported to you or your study provider so that your doctor can be alerted to that.
Thank you.
That's an excellent question.
Dr. Sullivan, if I could also add regarding the aims of the study of aging, because I find this very interesting. In addition to looking at risk factors or reasons behind why some people develop Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia as they age, the study of aging is also going to be seeking to understand why other people develop in a healthy way without developing some of those chronic diseases. And in addition to that, it's going to look at why people in certain geographical areas like Mississippi and other parts of the South have a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease or dementia, and also looking at racial differences in the development of the diseases. So it's definitely broader in that regard as well.
At this time, we're going to bring you the Extension Minute from the Mississippi State University Extension Service, and then I'm going to come back and recap the wonderful, awesome job that our presenters did today. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my awesome coworker, Philip Vanderveer. If you are on the phone, if you are on the call, please star 6 yourself and unmute, and the time is yours. And unmute your line as well. So we'll see if he could get unmuted, but I will say this has been another awesome Partnership Power Hour call. We have learned some valuable information from the presenters that have spoken on today. And I just thank you for letting us know about the normal characteristics of aging, so we'll know that these things will happen with age, but there is some concern if we are having that greater memory loss. Thank you for bringing us the definitions and the risk factors, and what you said with those risk factors, like air pollution. You talked about hypertension, smoking, obesity, exercising, diabetes. All of these things play a vital part in getting some of these ailments. And the thing is, at the extension service, what we do stress, we talk about making sure that we stay fit, that we're eating the proper amount of food, the right, correct portion size, and exercise to help prevent some of these things from happening, and getting that 150 minutes a week. You all start with any exercise that you enjoy. There's no one best exercise that you can do. The one that we always comment is the one that you would do, because some people might like to walk, some people might like to run, some swim, whatever it is, but find something that you enjoy doing so that you can get those minutes in every day. Again, they shared so much information, and the facts were just startling. With 57 million individuals are living with dementia, and the frightening part is in 2050, you said that this number could actually triple. So again, we thank the Mind Center for what you're doing, the research that you're providing, the healthcare that you're providing, and also the education that you're providing for the community, and also the help that you also provide for the caregivers that are taking care of the individuals that are going through this. As you say, it is not only affecting that particular individual, but it's also affecting everybody that is connected to that loved one. So again, we say thank you so much for coming and sharing this information with us. I don't know if my coworker was able to unmute. If you did, you can speak at this time. If not, do we have any? Oh, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead. The time is yours.
Like Sharon said, I'm Philip Vandiver, and she was telling a little bit about what Extension does. We also deal with agricultural products, homeowners with yards and trees, and farmers growing their crops, and anybody vegetable gardens, that type stuff. And a topic now that the kids are out of school, and it's getting warmer, and they may get out, and you may get out and run around in your yard or walk around and find stickers. These stickers, if you found them, they're actually called lawn birdweed, and like I said, now that you found them, it's too late to actually try to control them. If you'd like to control them, the best time to do it is a pre-emerge, which would be around October. The degrees, around 70 degrees is a great time to do it. But I know everybody's busy doing things. So they pre-emerge. It's not an option. January, February, March, maybe we can think about it then. And like I said, you can go out in your yard and look at them. They're going to look kind of like a small parsley plant. That's before the stickers have started to develop, and there's chemicals there that can, control them at that point. You can go to your local garden store, and they can pretty much give you some Mixol or whatever that can kind of help control any of the products that you have there to do the pre-emerge. If you want to go that route, or if you want to procrastinate and wait till it's January, February, March. Mississippi, we may have 80-degree weather in March. It may be too late. So January and February probably be the best time to do this. But there's a list of chemicals that you can use on this. Get them, like I said, get them from the garden store. There's an extension office in every county. You can contact them. You can get on our website, extension.msstate.edu, or you can get in touch with Sharon and get in touch with me, and we can go ahead and cover some of that if y'all would like to. But stickers, not fun in your yard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as you said, if you have additional questions, we provide so much information on so many different areas, from financial management to food safety, food nutrition, just agriculture, 4-H, so many different topics. And again, you can visit our website. We have an extension agent in all of the 82 counties, as well as with the Partnership for a Healthy Mississippi. They have the tobacco-free coalitions in all 82 counties, and as they talk about one of the risk factors, we talked about smoking. One of the things that the coalition really promotes is the dangers of secondhand smoke. So not only are you the person that is smoking is affected, but also the people that are around that individual that is affected by that secondhand smoke. 7,000. I always like to push this. 7,000 chemicals are in secondhand smoke. So you are being affected by some of those chemicals, or if you are around somebody. Again, smoking affects almost every part of your body, and it is a risk factor as well on the subject that we talked about today. Do we have any community announcements, any upcoming programs that anyone would like to share at this time from your organization? If you do, please star 6 yourself and you can share at this time.
I don't necessarily have a community announcement, but I would just like to take a minute to plug the Partnership Power Hour on Spotify. If you would like to learn more about MSU Extension Service, check out our episode on Healthy Living with MSU Extension. I do not have any upcoming events, though, to announce. So,
Claire, I have 2 announcements real quick. July 26th to the 27th, we are in the Yazoo County are hosting our first Surf Safe class. This is for individuals that need this particular certification, usually our restaurants and child care providers, anybody that has food service establishment. We will be offering that class. They can call our office to register for that. The number is 662-746-2453, or if you need more information about that program. And also, we are preparing for a Super Saturday Child Caregiver training on August 27th. We're going to be providing about 5 or 6 contact hours. We're lining up the presenters now to be able to give them quality programs so that they can be more equipped when they go back into their child care centers. And that is it from me, Claire. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, if that's all our community announcements, I will say thank you once again to our wonderful presenters today. Thank you, everyone, for coming on and for bringing your questions. So, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday, and we will see y'all again on June the 7th. Everybody, have a good day. Thank you.